Good afternoon. These are the geopolitical megatrends of today. 1. Challenges to the balance of power in the three big strategic theaters, the Euro-Atlantic, the Indo-Pacific, and the Greater Middle East. A rise, 2, in strategic self-determination, as more powers assert their national interests in collaboration with others who are like-minded and sometimes even in competition with them. 3, the emergence of various minilateral security arrangements, where a small group of countries cooperate for very specific purposes, such as the AUKUS arrangements to provide nuclear-powered submarines to Australia. 4, the resurgence of terrorism risk in the Middle East and Africa, complicated by the proliferation of non-state actors and the creation of competing private armies. 5, technological competition as a core element of international power politics and the use of economic statecraft and regulatory standards as ways to achieve competitive advantage. Here, the smallest things matter most. A single human hair is 80,000 to 100,000 nanometers in size. The best semiconductors are 7, 5, or 3 nanometers in size, and on the control of this skill hangs a great deal of international relations. On the big picture, the US was almost written out of the geopolitical script recently. Its decline as a global influencer was much predicted. It wrote itself out partly with the calamitous Afghanistan withdrawal. Then it became US power that ensured that Ukraine could defend itself against Russia's invasion. President Macron's European strategic autonomy was a slogan without a sufficient military budget, military capability, or military will. The US has been vital, but the strategic response could have been much faster. Imagine if Ukrainian pilots had trained on US F-16s 15 months ago, or longer-range cruise missiles had been delivered earlier, or if the Black Sea Fleet had been sunk last year. Perhaps the war would be over by now. Either way, Russia is a much diminished power. Still, it was a mistake not to present Russia's invasion as an act of recolonization, which it was, and to fail to present the European security order as a core interest of the West, which it is. Now, in the Middle East, a horrific terror attack by Hamas on 7 October, resulting in an Israeli decision to eliminate Hamas, that in turn may risk further escalation involving other states and other non-state actors. The Middle East moved from a process of diplomatic reconciliation, military de-escalation, and prospective economic cooperation to a dramatic revival of terror tactics, war, humanitarian catastrophe, and economic uncertainty. 7 October represented a clear intelligence and military failure on Israel's part, but also a failure of its security model. And again, all eyes are turned to what the US may do or won't do. It is now in the strange strategic position of having simultaneously to deter Iran from escalating and deter Israel from escalating, and to deter Iran, it may have to deter Israel, and to deter Israel, it may have to deter Iran. Dynamic diplomacy is now required to contain the conflict and create the conditions for a more stable outcome. I have a question. Could a coalition of the willing and the relevant Arab states be formed now, proactively to stand up a new post-conflict administration in Gaza, basically shorn of Hamas, but not borrowing too heavily from the Palestinian Authority, while pressing for a revitalized effort to establish a state of Palestine? Or will this effort of building a new Gaza governing structure and a more viable two-state solution be left somehow to Western states to assure? Meanwhile, in Asia, most countries in the region would like the US to remain a resident power, precisely to ensure a multipolar Asia and limit the risk that Asia falls under a Chinese unipolar spell. But The US and China are talking past each other. The actions of both are at variance with what they are saying. Self-awareness is notably in short supply. But it is in the tech domain that much of this plays out. China has an international tech strategy. It is called the Digital Silk Road. We at the IISS have a database called China Connects that maps the DSR across over 100 countries and more than a dozen technologies, including 5G, data centers, e-commerce, fiber optic networks, satellite technology, smart cities, and many others. The US is concerned about the theft of intellectual property, the use of Western-developed tech for military purposes, cyber operations, and the internationalization of the surveillance state. In the meantime, concerns arise about what happens with the accelerated development of AI, and even more when quantum computing is brought to the fore. Some of these battles will play out in the sanctions and economic statecraft domain, but there is also a three-way battle in the regulatory space. Three tech regulation strategies will compete. The US leads a market-based approach. The EU prefers a rights-driven model, and China is driving a state-driven model. All these models seek to be extraterritorial. Which one wins will determine a lot. In general, the future is about tying hard power, smart power, and soft power to fast power. Speed is the force multiplier in today's world. Militaries have rapid deployment special forces, diplomats special envoys, financiers computer-generated trades, and hackers, unfortunately, have AI-enabled cyber attacks. Speed is too often confused with carelessness, but governments, companies, and entrepreneurs who train well, are well prepared, can act at speed, and to do so, the right collaborators must be found at the right time. Hence my maxim. In today's world, when multilateral institutions are too big and too slow, coalitions of the willing must be formed to solve problems at the speed of relevance. I have three pieces of policy advice. One, policy advice to the West. Avoid a new ideological battle between democracies and autocracies. Promotion of democracy is understandable, but hard. Democracy cannot be exported. The non-tariff barriers are high. Democracy needs to have local roots. It cannot easily be fertilized from abroad. Good governance is another matter. Good governance is worth both promoting and supporting. And so another maxim. Good governance without democracy is safer strategically than is democracy without good governance. Know who are the countries in each region on which both strategic and economic relations can safely be built, and concentrate on advancing those pragmatic interests. Two, policy advice to the global south. Moving from non-alignment to multi-alignment is wise. Better to have many friends than only a few. Depending on only one security supplier of defense can be risky. Strategic hedging is a natural choice in an uncertain world. But strategic hedging, rather like financial hedging, requires active portfolio management. Political investments can turn sour, the value of certain asset classes can shift. Right now, Russia's strategic currency is in free fall. Soon, some countries will realize that they are a bit overweight Russia in their strategic portfolio and will have to adjust accordingly. And beware of hubris. Great powers too often are victim to hubris. Confident, medium, rising powers can also be hubristic. Third and finally, policy advice for companies. It is not good enough to be neutral or to have good ESG, CSR, and stakeholder engagement. That's all very turn-of-the-century Davos. To acquire and maintain a political license to operate in various markets, companies need their own foreign policy. They need to do their geopolitical due diligence and then engage in the right corporate diplomacy. Geopolitical risk is the risk du jour. Companies need to have a foreign policy attitude of mind, linking astute analysis and emotional intelligence to navigate vastly different political realities. In the future, companies will be judged as much on their geopolitical acumen as on their profit-making capacities. And in the future, and the future is now, the two will be linked. Good luck to all of you in keeping a sense of direction as the compass of geopolitics continues to spin at speed. Thank you.